Hi everyone, it's Luke at Young Writers, and I'm here today with the wonderful Francesca Gibbons. So how are you doing today?
Hi, I'm really well, thank you.
Good. And we always kick off with this question for anyone that might be a diehard fan of yours, or for someone that might be on the YouTube channel and not come across your work before. Would you like to give us an introduction and step into the world of yourself, of Francesca Gibbons?
Okay, yes, I can do that. I'm Francesca Gibbons and I live in the Cotswolds, which I'm really lucky to live there because there's lots of walking around me. I spend most of my time writing, hanging out with friends, obviously reading. You can see I've got all these books behind me, and kind of walking and trying to have adventures myself.
Nice. I mean, we'll get on to the walking, I think, in a bit with the inspiration and whatnot. But to start with, you have your trilogy, which is called A Clock of Stars. And the first installment is The Shadow Moth. So would you like to catch us up and give us an introduction into the first book, possibly without spoilers, in case anyone hasn't quite got there yet, and bring us up to speed before we get on to the second?
Yes, definitely. So the first book, The Shadow Moth, is about two sisters called Imogen and Marie who they don't always get on. I think it's fair to say, like a lot of siblings, they have their disagreements. Um, but one day they're visited by a strange silver moth, and they follow this moth through a door in a tree and into another world where they this is a small spoiler, but they get trapped there. And the book is essentially about their adventures trying to get themselves back home again, but also how their relationship changes throughout those adventures. And they I'm not going to promise that they never argue again, but they definitely they feel slightly differently about each other, and understand each other a bit better, I think it's fair to say, by the end of the book.
And then we move on to, boom, the second installment of the trilogy, which is out now. It came out very recently, called Beyond the Mountains. We're going beyond the mountains to this one. So now that we're caught up on the first one, would you like to give us a little introduction into what this wonderful book is?
Thank you. Yes, so it features quite a few of the same characters as book one, but with some new ones as well. So Imogen and Marie return to the Magic Kingdom, but this time they get separated, and the book is it's kind of like a really, in films and things when you have a chase scene with one car is chasing the other car, or someone on a motorbike. It's like a giant extended chase scene. So Imogen is with Miro, who's a character from book one. They kind of team up and they go on this huge chase. So they're chasing the baddie who's got Marie and trying to bring her back home. And that chase takes them beyond the mountains, which is unexplored territory from book one. So there's new monsters and creatures and characters there.
And then coming back to what you mentioned earlier, you talked upon, where you live and the area around. And I read elsewhere that your inspiration kind of centers around your surroundings and from when, like, your escapades when you was younger, and even a derelict garden, which is what kind of fed into a lot of this books. And then you come from derelict gardens to, like, I don't know if you can see on there, but like giant cats and river sprites and silver moths and like very original ideas. So where do you get this originality from, quite simply? And kind of like a follow-up from that, where this is a trilogy, where do you keep finding new originality from? Because it's one thing to create wonderful things, and it's another thing to create wonderful things from scratch another time, and then another time. Like, that must be quite difficult to come up with these, like, it's not centered on a real life experience, it's not like a historical thing, and I find it fascinating how something can be conjured from nothing.
Thank you. First of all, I'm not sure that they're as original as these ideas as you're saying, because they're all partially stolen, and I think a lot of writers will say the same. They're all partially stolen from other books, and you can find definitely the river sprites. That actually there is a river sprite on the back of book two, if you can see that at the bottom, lurking. river sprites have some things in common with mermaids, even though they're quite adamant that they're not mermaids and that they're totally different. So I think, like a lot of books, there's ideas borrowed from stories that I've read as a child, and the ideas come from everywhere, from conversations you have with people and things that you see on TV. But I think, to get around to answering your question properly, I think for me, maybe the biggest source of inspiration is the natural world, and adventures, small adventures, not quite as exciting as the adventures that happen in this book, but small adventures that I've had in the natural world. And book one was because the girls go through a garden when they find this door in the tree. So it's partially inspired by a garden that I used to visit when I was about 12, so a similar age to the girls in the book. And I was 12 when I had the idea for it, because I remember going through these gardens and I was a bit bored with my two younger sisters and my parents. My parents were making us walk there. I didn't really want to be there. I wanted to be at home playing a computer game. I was thinking, like, what can I do to entertain myself and my sisters on this walk? And I started imagining things, making stuff up, which I think is something a lot of children and young people do. And from that, I thought, oh, wouldn't it be amazing in this totally overgrown garden if I found a door in a tree? And what would I do if I found a door like that? Probably I'd open it and have a look inside. So the story grew from there, and I wrote it down when I was 12 in a notebook and read it to my sisters, and then forgot about it. And then years later, when I was fully grown, the idea came back to me, and I was thinking about that door in the tree again and wrote it down. So it's an idea that's come from kind of being bored outdoors. And that's what I try to recreate, I think, for writing the second book and the third book that I'm working on at the moment. I try to get myself in a position where I'm bored outdoors, and then you have to make stuff up.
I mean, I think it's really nice because it makes it relatable for everyone, for anyone, and it kind of pushes the narrative of, like, it can come from anywhere. You could be sat in a room with 4 white walls and it's, something can happen, and that's where the story has come from. And even though it is maybe not no one, I don't know, let's not, but no one that I know of has gone into a tree and opened a magical door and entered a new world in this world. But it's something that you've created from that spark and from that idea. And I think it's really nice to show others that no matter what you're doing, no matter where you are, there's the stuff around you that can help feed into your inspiration and give you something to write about. So I mean, I think it's really cool. And then, so on that topic as well, you write these giant cats or river sprites into reality, and the fabulous Chris Riddell has drawn them or illustrated them into reality to give people an idea of what they look like, and created almost something made up or something imagined into this, like, physical thing that's, like, kind of there. And that's really exciting. So it must have been such an honor to work with Chris, because I mean, he's done loads.
Yeah, it was so exciting when I found out that he'd agreed to illustrate it. Yeah, I couldn't talk about anything else for quite a few days. And it has been a really incredible experience. I think he's brought so much of his own imagination to the story, because obviously when you're creating a magical world, you want to put in as much detail as you can, but if you put too many details in, people get bored. So there's a lot of details missing, and it feels like Chris Riddell, when he's been doing the drawings for it, he's added another layer of detail. So there's things like, actually I should have got this ready to show you. There's a character in book 1 called Blazon Bilbets, who's this big hunter guy. He looks quite alarming, actually. I don't know if you can see him there.
Yeah.
But he is described in the book, but he isn't described in this much detail. So Chris Riddell has put, don't know if you can see, but bear teeth on a necklace around his neck.
Yeah.
Which isn't a detail that's in the story, but it makes total sense, because this guy is always claiming that he's hunted loads of bears. and boasting about it. So of course he'd wear bare teeth as like a trophy around his neck. So there's loads of little details like that that I hadn't thought of or written into the book that Chris Riddell's brought to it. So it feels like he's really like layered up and built another layer of magic to the world.
Yeah, I mean, it's really nice because it builds like an almost like two-way relationship, as opposed to, you know, here's a story, draw it. It's like, actually, let's do this together. Let's create the characters together, and it kind of brings, you know, like a duality to it, which I think is really fun. And
it totally does. And I've got his okay, that's a map from book one stuck on the wall, but up here where you can't see, and over there on the messy side of the room, I've got loads of his illustrations from book one and now from book two stuck on the wall. So when I'm writing, if I'm thinking about a character that he's illustrated before, I can look at the illustration and use that to inspire me again. So it is definitely a circular thing. It's really nice to be able to work with someone else's imagination as well.
And then, like, as you've shown, the illustrations of the characters are like on your website, but also at the start of the book. So when you open the book and when you start, you know, possibly the first book, the Shadow Moth, the illustrations are there at the beginning. And I find that really interesting, because I think what a lot of people possibly enjoy about reading or like look forward to is creating these characters in their mind. And oftentimes, unless it's made into a film, you actually don't know what it is. And that can be the fun, not always, that can be the fun of it. So was it a conscious decision to give readers the illustrations to show them what your characters might look like, as opposed to like imagining them themselves?
It's a really good question, because yes, it does slightly take away that ability to draw their face yourself. But so these books, both of these books, you can see they're quite chunky. They've got a lot of characters in them. So when I first wrote this one in particular, the Shadow Moth, I had a list of characters at the beginning, so what their name was and who they were, which is a bit like what they do at the beginning of scripts for plays. They just have a character list there. And my editor, because you work with a whole team of people when you make a book, it's not just me typing away. There's people helping me and giving me feedback on it. So when my editor saw that, he was like, he basically said nicely, that's a bit boring, Fran. So we got rid of it. And then Chris Riddell, when he first started doing the illustrations, the first thing he sent through to me was these character sketches, which are supposed to be loose sketches, but they're incredible. And that seems to be, or at least in these books, that seems to be part of his process, is to sketch the characters first. And I don't know if it was him or if it was my editor, but between the two of them, they had this idea of, well, why don't, instead of having a list of characters at the front, just their names, why don't we have their faces, these character sketches that Chris Riddell has done at the beginning? And it just feels like a much more exciting way to introduce them. But I think when you've got so many characters, it can be helpful for readers, and they've got quite unusual names. A lot of people won't be familiar with the names. So if you're reading about Agnieszka Mazinar, for example, and you're like, oh, who is this woman? I can't remember. You can flip back to the beginning and be like, yes.
Yeah. I mean, it's no bad thing. It's just different. That's all. So I just find it really, it's an interesting idea. And it works. So go with it. And then we go. So as we said at the start, it's a trilogy, which is 3. And this is number 2, which means there is a third coming. So is there anything you can share with us about the third? Where are you? Is it coming out next week? When can we get it?
It's definitely not coming out next week. Straight after we finish chatting, I'm going to go and take myself somewhere quiet and try to write some more of it. It's due out at the same time next year, so autumn 2022, is that? Yeah. Don't know what year we're in anymore. That comes out next year, and I can't tell you too much about it because it's still hatching in my head, but I can tell you that Agnieszka's prophecy, which you find out more about her prophecy in book 2, Agnieszka's prophecy is still going strong, and she's busy trying to find out which kingdom is the greatest. So it's kind of like a puzzle. And if anyone out there happens to know which kingdom in any world is the greatest, please let me know. I'm trying to figure it out.
Yeah, so essentially, who knows where it's going at the moment, but it's actually like really exciting, because I think, you know, people will look back on this now and see where you are, and in a year's time the third book will be done, and like we're at a point now where who knows where that's, and I don't know, that's quite exciting. There's quite an exciting idea to that. So if you're watching a year in advance and you're watching this with a third book in your hand, hi, Inception. But how cool. And then, so to wrap it up, anyway, this will be going out hopefully to some young writers or some budding authors, or whoever else might be watching it, who might want to take their hand to writing the next Clock of Stars trilogy or single book or whatever that might be. So do you have any top advice for anyone out there that wants to put pen to paper?
Yes, I do. So my advice is quite simple, really. It's basically about practicing, because I think sometimes it feels like you see books, or I even see my own book and I think, how did I write that? I don't remember writing every word, it's just appeared here. And I'm quite pleased with it now, but I remember at the time I wasn't always pleased with it. And I think it's easy to think that these things just, they appear and that they're good to begin with, but they're not. It's definitely about practice. I've written so many different versions of this book and improved it along the way. And I think a bit like if you're learning to play a musical instrument, or if you're learning to ride the bike, or learning anything, basically, it's about practicing and putting a bit of time in. But I don't think you have to put a lot of time in. If you don't want to sit there for 5 hours and write, then that's okay. I think even if you just write for 20 minutes most days after school, or if you did half an hour at the weekend when you were waiting for your parents to do something, that's a really good way to write, I think, and just to keep making enough time for it, and gradually you'll get better and better, and your books will get longer and longer. And then one day your books might be published, and I can't wait to see them in the bookshops.
I mean, it's true. You know, it's something that many people mirror, and it's completely right. You know, you practice anything, and that's a really great thing to compare it to. In that, you know, playing the piano or whatever, it's not. I think sometimes it's portrayed in like a movie that you kind of just sit down and you're like, okay, off we go, great, done. And it doesn't. You only see oftentimes the success. You don't see the 10 years of practice, the 10 years of like failing to begin with, the 10 years of like trying to get there to that point. And that's really important to be aware of. And if you're aware of it, it also means that you can deal with it and you can go for it. And you can take that time, and the earlier you start, the better you're going to get, the more time that goes into it. So it's really important for people to know, to do. And yeah, it's really great. So thank you. And thank you for your time.
I think you're right. Sorry, just to add to that.
Oh, no, it's okay.
Another idea. I think people talk about talent, especially with creative things, whether you're painting or being an artist, whether you're writing. People talk about it as though you're born with talent. And I think that's what I'm trying to say in a very roundabout way. That I don't think it's really about that. I think it's about enjoying it. And if you enjoy it, you'll put more time into it, and then you'll get better.
And you can take your hand at anything. Maybe you aren't the best at writing at the moment, but that doesn't mean that you can't become an author. You know, you might be like struggling in English class, but you absolutely can have a book in you know, in a few years or whatever. Like you don't have to have like an innate ability to be able to do it from the off. And some people just don't. I mean, God, I remember like struggling English GCSE, like really, truly. And now it's a large part of what I do. So like genuinely, and vice versa, if you're awful at playing a guitar and you want to sell out the O2 arena, like go do it. Just practice, put your heart into it, and if you enjoy it, then it will happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, yeah, thank you for taking the time today and for chatting to us about the book. The Clock of Stars Beyond the Mountain is out now in all great bookstores, and so do go down and buy it. And also the first one, so it's the second, remember, it's the first one, so that's out too. So if you don't want to skip a book, There we go. Go for 2, and yeah, they're really fantastic. If fantasy is your thing, if novels are your thing, if like there's so much to it that there's no excuse. Go read it.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I mean, good luck with it, because it's a new baby. So I hope it all goes fantastically, and the third one too goes fantastically.
Thank you.
Of course. Well, we'll see you around.
Yes, see you soon.
Bye.